So things are growing and deals are closing. Work is getting done, but cash still feels tight. This is a pattern, and it's not a coincidence. Today in Profit Visibility Lab, we're going to take a closer look at liquidity drag and understand more about what is this pattern, how do we detect it, and most importantly, what do we do about it so that revenue and cash can flow the way we need it to. So, scaling amplifies what's broken. So, when we have situations in our business that are not ideal, we want to make sure that we understand what they are so that we don't scale the distortion. So we always say here that diagnosis precedes deployment. Now, just to level set, so revenue flows in the business system has a flow, and revenue in your business flows through 4 structural domains: demand, conversion, capacity, and cash. Every business operates within this flow. Now, even with the flow alone is not enough to understand what's broken. So revenue flow helps us with or helps us with the business growth, but constraints tell us where that growth breaks. And until we identify the location of the constraint, every decision is a guess. Now, this is the streamline and scale framework. And this is where we manage the work of the revenue system. And so this is where a founder can see where revenue flows. You can see where constraints live, but most importantly, you can also see where it's not safe to scale, because this shows the actual work of the revenue system in each of the 4 quadrants. Now, the 4 primary domains correlate to the quadrants of the revenue system. So if you think of the domains like the physics of business, and then the quadrants are where the work is managed. So demand, the work around the demand demand domain is managed within Spotlight. The work around conversion. So when we start talking about where to find and locate things that need fixing in conversion, that happens in the offer quadrant. For capacity, that happens in the activate quadrant, where work gets done and where we fulfill the promise. And then for cash, that happens in retain. It's where we take the value that we created and turn it into cash. Okay. Now, a constraint exists in only one domain at a time. That one domain is called the primary domain. Okay. So how do we diagnose a constraint? The first thing we want to do is we look for a pattern. And in a service business, if you're a service founder, things are a little bit harder to see. If we were in manufacturing, we could see a manufacturing line and we could see things move down the line. But in a service business, we don't have the same luxury of visibility. And so we identify a pattern within the work that allows us to make a determination about which domain that constraint could exist in. So once we identify the constraint domain, so the patterns align with the constraint domain, then once we locate it in the revenue system is where we can really begin to make the fixes that are necessary for the system to free up our revenue and cash flow. We look in the revenue system for the signals and the metrics that affect that particular area that we're looking at, and then we confirm and quantify the constraint. Now, this process allows us to utilize the demand to utilize the quadrant to be able to locate where the problem is we need to fix. Now, each week we're focusing on a specific pattern. We're learning the skill of pattern recognition. This week we're looking at liquidity drag. We talk about how the deals are up, we're making money, and we are closing deals, but the cash still feels tight. Liquidity drag is actually in the conversion domain. A lot of times, founders will misdiagnose this as demand, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but it's actually a conversion constraint in this case. It is located in the offer quadrant, which means when we identify that it is a conversion domain constraint, we look to the offer quadrant to identify the work that needs to happen to fix the domain or to fix the constraint. Now, in terms of a symptom, a founder symptom, what you may say to yourself, or I or another founder may say, you'll find yourself saying something like, we're closing deals, but cash is still tight. The symptoms in the field are things that you observe day to day, right? Revenue's increasing, deals are closing consistently, the team is busy delivering, but cash is still tight. Timing feels off. Pressure shows up. Then we look at the signals. We have delayed payments. We have invoices collected after delivery. We have discounting to close deals and front-loaded costs, right? Because we have to deliver on it, right? And then cash arrives late. It's after the revenue. So in this case, there's a mechanism at play that causes or results in the liquidity drift. So what that looks like is when revenue is booked versus when cash is collected. So I used to be a CPA, and there's revenue recognition is a thing, right? But revenue is not cash, right? So the misalignment creates a working capital gap. What is working capital? Current assets minus current liabilities, working capital. And that's working capital is what you want to see in your bank account to be positive, right? So this is the mechanism. We're looking at when revenue is booked, but we're not looking at when cash is collected. So let's look at an example. We always, each week, want to look at an actual example to help solidify the concept of the pattern so that we can recognize it. In this case, we have an agency. It's monthly revenue, $150,000. The average deal size, $25K. Closing about 6 deals a month. Payment terms, net 30 to 45. And so monthly expenses of $120,000. When we look at this, let's look at the time if we do a little deep dive. So we've got the revenue booked of $150,000, but we have delayed cash collection. So we only get $90K on that $150K that was closed. and our expenses are 120K. So we need to incur those expenses to deliver the revenue, but we don't have the cash lined up. Now, cash in 90,000, cash out 120,000, net negative $30,000 gap in cash. This is where revenue is up, but cash is tight. Why? Because of this timing. Even when revenue is growing. Okay. So the founder sees cash pressure. We need more cash, right? So the founder concludes, we need more sales, we need more leads, more activity. The response based on that diagnosis from the founder is to increase marketing, push more deals, and discount to close faster, right? These are the actions that we want to take so that we get more cash in so we can close the gap. Now, there's a response, which is which the original diagnosis is, and then there's the origin, which actually is where the constraint lives. Here, the response was, we need more sales, we need more marketing, more volume. But actually, in the origin, the real issue was the conversion structure, the payment terms, the deal design, and the cash timing mismatch. Those are in the constraint, the conversion domain. So even though you're deploying with more sales and more marketing, more volume, the actual issue, the constraint, lives somewhere else. So what are the consequences of this misdiagnosis? So we had a diagnosis. Our founder made a diagnosis. We need more activity. And so the activity, we expected 150,000 in growth. What we actually received was cash strain, delayed reinvestment, and stress on payroll, because growth creates pressure instead of stability. It amplified what was wrong, right? That activity. So if we look at a system baseline, a healthy system, revenues 150K, cash collected 150K, expenses 120K, we're up 30K, right? But that's not what happened. So in this case, we scaled the distortion. The misdiagnosis was that we needed more activity, and we scaled that, right? So we increase the sales volume. The revenue grows to 200,000, but the cash lag increases because now we needed more expenses to deliver on the increased volume, but the cash lag was the same. So the expenses rise faster because now we need to support more activity. And so we're scaling the distortion. We're scaling the distortion. And the liquidity gap expands. The second option we have here is path B. And this is where, instead of scaling the distortion, we identify the constraint and we take action to fix the constraint before we scale. Okay? In this case, we adjust the conversion structure with shortened payment terms. We collect more upfront deposits. We align the revenue to cash. And now cash moves with revenue. So same revenue growth, different outcomes. Path A, we get more cash pressure, more expenses, more lag in cash. With path B, we have cash stability because now we have matched our revenue with the cash. So constraint determines the result. Now, there are downstream effects. So how does liquidity drift propagate through the other domains? Because remember, there's only one primary domain. What happens in the other domains? So the conversion spreads to capacity and it feels like delivery strain. Why? Because we have more coming in that we have to deliver, right? Cash, we have liquidity pressure. Still, the constraint wasn't addressed. Demand is forced volume chasing. Like we're chasing more volume, and we're really amplifying what's distorted. But the constraint is still in conversion, even though there are impacts downstream in other domains. Until the constraint in the conversion domain is addressed, there will still be distortion during scale. So, what is the path for resolution of this? The first thing we want to do is pause the scale. And I know that feels counterintuitive for a founder because we have to take action. We want to be active and fix it. But in this case, pausing the scale is the right thing because we don't want to invest resources and time in addressing a fix that will not resolve the constraint, right? Once we do that, we audit the conversion structure. So we see the pattern, we audit the conversion structure and identify where in the revenue system in the conversion or offer quadrant is the work being done and how is it being affected? What does it look like? Then we align the payment timing, looking at the actual work. When does revenue close? When do we collect cash? What adjustments can we make to align those two things up so they support the cash timing? And then we confirm the constraint domain, right? Up until this point, we have identified, we have visibility, and we have an idea of where the constraint is, but we still need to confirm the constraint so that we know that we're deploying a fix in the correct area to have an impact on our cash timing. Then we scale. We scale with the constraint being fixed. Okay. So at this point, as a founder, there's kind of a choice that you have to make, right? You can guess, which, sometimes guessing is the answer because we need to make a quick decision. But the cost of those quick decisions can add up. The other option is you can confirm what's actually happening before you deploy any type of fix or decide what to do next. So that's typically where something like the reality map comes into play so that you can map out before you have to deploy. That's when it becomes relevant. Now, revenue is not cash. We had to have two takeaways from this time we had together. The one is that revenue is not cash. And the second one is that conversion determines when cash arrives. The conversion is what determines that. So if this felt familiar to you, then you might want to learn more about how to identify the constraints. So for that, if that's something that you are looking to learn more about, you want to get more clarity about where the constraints are in your business, I created a snapshot. It takes about 2 minutes to help you orient into the pattern recognition process. And if you've already taken a snapshot, the next step is the alignment check. Until next time.